Hello and welcome to Conspirahistory, a series that explores the origins of odd conspiracies, their first mentions, their journey into the mainstream, and if the name doesn't make it obvious, their history. Now, with that said, I'm not here to debunk conspiracies, which is perfect timing with YouTube's recent announcements. Instead, I'm just collecting some info, consolidating the story, and letting you come to your own conclusion. Occasionally, I may comment on the story, but I recognise I'm no expert, more just someone of a general interest. Now let's kick this off with the city that birthed the United States, bought us cheesesteaks, and is one of the rare places to feature its name in the Conspiracies title. This is Conspirahistory, and this is the Philadelphia Experiment. The story goes, it's October 1943, and we're at the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard. The US Navy are looking for ways to fight and avoid German U-boats. Using research based around Einstein's unified field theory and anti-gravity, they somehow managed to render a destroyer escort ship invisible for a brief moment. In broad daylight, the USS Eldridge disappears after being engulfed by a green fog-like mist, wherein it teleports to another dimension, encounters aliens, makes a brief appearance in Norfolk, Virginia, and then reappears back at the shipyard. On its return, the crewmen aboard the Eldridge suffered from severe side effects. Among corpses are madmen, confused men, and dying men fused to the ship's hull. Results so horrific, the Navy shut the experiment down. The Office of Naval Research later would deny an experiment was even possible except for in the realm of science fiction. And to their credit, 1938 to 1948 is known as the golden age of science fiction. The experiment went on to become the subject matter of a lot of pop culture. It's featured in multiple books, conspiracy-related TV shows, a Hollywood film, and even spoofed in the Command & Conquer series. So, where did the story come from? It all starts with this man, Morris K. Jessup, an author who in some circles was dubbed the most original extraterrestrial theorist of the 50s. In 1955, Jessup was running a tour to promote his book, The Case for the UFO. During this tour, he'd encourage audiences to appeal to their local legislators to fund research based around anti-gravity and Einstein's unified field theory. Like a 50s Elon Musk, the man had dreams of establishing effective and economical space travel. After a few events, he receives a letter from a Carlos Miguel Allende, where for the first time the Philadelphia experiment is introduced, making Allende the only witness to come forward for over 40 years. Jessup had, let's say, fair doubts about the story, so in an attempt to sway him, Allende offers his military number and the claimed newspapers had already published witness accounts Jessup could never find. As if it would help, Allende reveals he's behind an alias. His real name is Carl M. Allen. Unimpressed, the author dismisses the story as hogwash and Carl as just some random crackpot, and the story would have remained buried there if not for the Office of Naval Research. The office, who would later deny it, incidentally helped create the conspiracy. In 1957, they'd received an unusual copy of Jessup's book, The Case for the UFO. There was no clue as to who sent it, just the words Happy Easter written onto the packaging. The copy contained strange handwritten annotations. It appeared as if the book had been passed back and forth between 3 different individuals, who would comment on the text, make reference to the Philadelphia experiment, and answer questions posed by Jessup in his book. Questions about odd storms, unexplained events, and other bizarre happenings. Questions the office at the time had struggled to answer themselves. To add to the strange nature of things, the 3 wrote with a disdain for human beings, spoke of people living in outer space, and referred to each other as gypsies. One went by Gemini, and the other 2 by the twins, who the office dubbed Mr. A and Mr. B. Looking for answers, they invited Jessup to Washington, D.C. to examine the copy. The author recognized Mr. A's handwriting as his crackpot pen pal, Carl M. Allen. Later, the author would guess that Mr. B and Gemini were probably Carl too. Much to the surprise of a confused Jessup, the office funded the publication of the annotated copy along with Carl's letters for study. For a Texas-based company, Vario Manufacturing, over 100 editions were printed and creatively dubbed the Vario editions and the Allende letters. Although later it suggested it was 2 individuals led by personal interest, the Office of Naval Research helped fund and give birth to the cornerstone for Carl's tale to find its way into the mainstream. In 1965, in the Vincent Gaddis book Invisible Horizon, an early account of the experiment is published, where Vincent quite fairly questioned, if there was nothing to the story, then why did the office fund the printing of the book in the first place? And a few years later, to add to the more conspiratorial nature of the story, Jessup commits suicide. Friends claimed the author fell into a deep depression, his wife had left him, there was a car crash the previous year, and he was failing to make any more commercial success with his writing. It was said the night before he took his life, he contacted a friend saying he'd made a breakthrough in the case. obvious food for conspiracy. However, Jessup maintained Carl was the author of all three annotations, and all the Vario documents did was make a big mystery out of nothing. Carl during the years pops up twice, once demanding a copy of what he called his book and a small payment from Vario Manufacturing, and once dropping into the Arizona office of Aerial Phenomenon, where he admitted the whole thing was a hoax. The story received its biggest boost in 1979 from the best-selling author on the Bermuda Triangle, Charles Berlitz. Charles releases The Philadelphia Experiment, Project Invisibility, based solely around the Vario documents and new correspondence with Carl, who, now in contact with an author, takes back any previous confession of a hoax. Carl's tale gets portrayed as fact. New details are added, such as the destroyer escort's number, 174, a detail he'd somehow neglected to mention previously, and other details, like Jessup's accounts on the whole thing, is almost conveniently skipped. The book goes on to inspire a Hollywood director. The Philadelphia Experiment, An Adventure Beyond Time, hits the big screens in 1984. The story, now more exciting, more compelling than ever, and some 40 years after the event, finally leads to a second wind. Al Biolek comes forward with claims of brainwashing and repressed memories the film helped to unbury. He goes on to make himself a name around the conspiracy, getting featured in shows like The Conspiracy Zone, History's Mysteries, and a documentary as recently as 2010. The story has been referenced in popular culture such as The X-Files, Doctor Who, B.O.B.'s song Dr. Aiden, and multiple games, including Half-Life 2 and Assassin's Creed. It even has its own IPA beer, which, just like the story, is said to be hazy. The whole thing is commonly referred to as a hoax. So, who are the naysayers? There's three main naysaying arguments I find most revealing. Ones that, like Jessup's take on the tale, tend to get missed in related media. Robert Gurman is a writer and an investigator of strange phenomena. In the 80s, Robert claimed little if any research had actually been done on Carl in his past. Tracking Carl to his hometown of Springdale, Pennsylvania, Robert meets Carl's father. The father produces a military certificate featuring Carl's military number. He also owned a copy of the Vario edition signed with love from the son. Inside the copy was a letter where Carl states he actually co-authored the book with Jessup. There was no Mr. A or Mr. B, so unfortunately, despite strange portrayals of the three annotators, no aliens, just an Allen. This could very well be the book that Carl demanded from Vario Manufacturing some 20 years before. The rest of Carl's family describe him as a man who loves to play games with those foolish enough to play audience. Once he faked a heart attack to get off work, only for his brother to later discover a medical text Carl had annotated with notes on heart attacks. Another time, he pretended to be an antique expert, bringing one local dealer to tears. Robert suggests a better title for the book on the tale would be The Philadelphia Hoax, Project Gullibility. In 1993, another investigation by Jackie F. Ali, titled The Anatomy of a Hoax, The Philadelphia Experiment, 50 years later, claims there was an experiment, it just wasn't an invisibility. It was actually in degaussing, a process of reducing a ship's magnetic signature using a highly charged coil wrapped around the ship's hull, a way of repelling magnetic torpedoes used by the German U-boat. An engineer approached Valley claiming to have knowledge of a top-secret experiment performed on the Eldridge and another destroyer escort at the time. The engineer suggested the bizarre conspiracy was down to loose sailor talk about a secret Navy experiment, that green fog-like mist most likely in an electric storm, and as for the idea of teleportation, restricted inland canals used by the Navy at the time. Canals that can make a 6-hour journey from Philadelphia to Norfolk, just 2 hours instead. And finally, the last account. In 1999, during a sailors' reunion, Eldridge crewmen claimed the ship was never actually stationed in Philadelphia. In an interview with the Philadelphia Inquirer, the sailors claimed the ship was stationed in Brooklyn at the time as a supposed experiment, which was confirmed by the ship's logs, by the captain, and US Navy records. Today, the conspiracy somehow still lives on. There are documentaries, YouTube videos, a 2012 TV adaptation, and for some strange reason, coverage recently in the British tabloid The Express. Clearly a slow news day for Britain. As for what happened to Carl, there's an interview in 1986 with him before he died. He continued to claim the experiment happened all the way to his deathbed. He made other claims like being close with Einstein and claimed the US was capable of having a starfleet armed with laser cannons that could incinerate any major city in the world. 30 years later, there's still no starfleet other than Picard's. Whatever you believe, I think Jessup was right to dismiss this as hogwash. Carl sounds like he's either crazy or a master troll, I guess for the time a hoaxer, and a pretty impressive one at that. But that's just my opinion. If you have a different take, you think I missed something, or maybe there's something you want me to cover, let me know in the comments. And if you like what I'm doing here, subscribe, like, hit the bell, all that jazz, and I'll see you back here for the next episode. This is Conspirahistory, and that was the Philadelphia experiment.